Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. And in case you haven't noticed, I'm in a different location. So the place that I work at, well, it's a little ways away from where I live, and there's a pretty big snowstorm outside. Actually, it's only windy now. I could probably drive home if I wanted to, but oh well. It was suggested by the meteorologists on TV to get a hotel. Well, actually, they personally told me that I should, since I work with them and they know where I live. So, but that's not why I'm here. I just watched Babylon in the theater. For some reason, it took like 15 minutes to get to the theater, which is only a mile and a half away, which I guess is the I guess is the byproduct of it snowing and it being windy out. Sorry, I'm trying to rack my brain on what all I remembered from it. Like, I mean, the movie was fantastic. I'm just gonna say right off the bat that I think this is gonna be like one of my favorite movies of all time. And I'm actually a little bit surprised that it wasn't directed by Martin Scorsese, because it kind of felt like a Scorsese film. So I only saw the trailer for this once, like a month or two ago. And when I found out that it was coming out on the 23rd of December, well, 22nd technically, because I got to see it tonight. I decided that I just had to see the movie because it stars Margot Robbie, Brad Pitt, Tobey Maguire is in it at some parts, and this one other guy who I don't know who he is, but he's basically the main character, and all of them just knock it out of the park. I honestly thought that this was gonna be like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but set in the 1920s, and surprisingly, I wasn't that far off. So the whole story is basically about Hollywood in the 1920s, where they're just finishing the whole silent movie era and going into bringing in sound and people actually talking, and the whole film is basically about sort of the rise and fall of three characters: Manny, his friend Nellie Leroy, and Brad Pitt's character Jack Conrad. And so Brad Pitt and Margot Robbie are our two actors, who are Jack and Nellie, and it basically details their rise to fame and the price that they have to pay for it, and then their eventual downfall in it. And it's really played off in very different ways. I'm trying my best not to spoil it for anyone, because the movie is just fantastic all around. But and even with the character Manny, it shows his rise to fame, even though he becomes, I believe, what they call a studio executive in the film industry. I can't quite remember, but a lot of people mistaken him for a producer, right? And the whole first act that was shown in the trailers of this huge, basically I want to say orgy party, but I'm not even sure if it was that. But it was this huge party with entertainment. There's a freaking elephant at some point, and I honestly thought for a second that that was gonna be the whole film, and thankfully it wasn't, because if it was, then I probably wouldn't have liked it all that much. I mean, the whole scene is stylish and everything, but I felt it being 20 minutes to a half hour was good enough. But basically uh, all the main characters that we follow, like Manny, Conrad, Nellie Leroy, this one African American man named Palmer, and this one Asian woman named Lady Faye, I believe her name is. Like they all basically like converge at this one like party, which is at the producer's place named Malik, who I can't remember the guy's name, but he was in the Goldbergs as the father. That's what I know him from. But from there, it basically springboards onto Nellie finally getting apart, Jack Conrad getting more roles, and Manny tagging along for the ride, basically, in working with both of them in movies. And the whole basically every scene is just fantastic. Like they could have made an entire movie just based on like almost every individual scene. There's scenes where it's just showing like Margot Robbie and Brad Pitt and the guy who plays Manny, like they're just working on movie sets, and like that whole scene is just fascinating because it basically shows like a behind the scenes of what they were doing, and it kind of shows like one aspect of filmmaking that some people don't really notice, that like some of the best scenes are like improvised, and like the actors a lot of times like they give it their all by drawing upon their own personal emotions. Like at one point, Margot Robbie is her character at least is like crying on command, and she reveals to like her director that like she just thinks of home, right? Meanwhile, Jack Conrad, through some circumstances, they have to wait to shoot his scene at sundown, and while he's like kissing this one other actress, like a butterfly lands on his shoulder, and that's like the perfect take for the film, right? And well, it was a great way of showcasing that like some of the best scenes in cinema are improvised. Another fantastic scene is like, or at least I thought it was great, and like one of the more like realistic scenes is when they finally like springboard into like bringing sound and voice into films, and they're showing like Nellie on the set of, I think, what's supposed to be like a dorm room, and she's playing like a schoolgirl. Like they basically go through 8 different takes because there's some kind of mistake in there that makes everybody just lose their crap, basically, which ends up culminating in like some guy eventually dying because like he's trapped in this box that's incredibly hot, and he ends up dying from heat stroke. Even though it was the best take, like the guy still died. And I'm gonna touch on that in a minute, but it's really great. I mean, I don't consider these spoilers because I'm not exactly saying exactly what happens, but it's one of the most real scenes to me of the film, because like it kind of shows what some people went through, and that like sometimes people were taken advantage of, and well, there were a lot of unsafe working conditions. I'll admit, like, there was a lot of the scenes were a bit of a blur to me. Except for one bit that's still fresh in my head, and this is where Tobey Maguire's character comes in. Like, basically, he plays this really creepy guy who Nellie owes money to, and when Manny gives him like the money, he takes him to this basically underground uh, I don't even know what this kind of underground pit where where the movie basically becomes a horror movie for like 10 or 15 minutes, and the whole thing is just great with Tobey Maguire like just being creepy, and like the lighting and like whatever makeup they did on all the people that are just in that scene. I honestly thought that that I stepped into like a horror movie with a cult or whatever. Like it just looked great. The last thing I'm gonna talk about really is that at some point in the end of the film, like there's sort of a scene where Manny is watching a movie and he realizes that the movie is basically about like his life and his and Jack's and Nellie's life, and like they basically made a mockery of it. And uh, I'm gonna touch on more on that in a minute, but there is this really great scene where it just goes through like basically all of the greatest like cinematic moments in history, and like it's a really kind of cool, mind-blowing scene. Well, not exactly mind-blowing, but it's a really cool scene where it's just a montage of a lot of films, and I don't know, just for that scene alone, it made me kind of like give the movie a round of applause. So there's that. So I think that's the closest thing I'm gonna say for spoilers to it, because like again, I want people to see it for themselves. Like I'm glad I saw this movie on the big screen, because this is one of those films that like should be watched on the big screen. Um, and I do like how sort of like layered the movie is in a way, where um, or like one of the main themes that I found from it was like how like movie eras kind of like how they kind of like come and go whenever. The whole movie was basically like the end of the silent era of films, and like into like a precursor to the films where they start to talk. And someone even touches upon that where like someone's talking to Jack and they're telling him like they're telling him that like his time is over, right? And that's basically what the movie was kind of about, where like it's the end of like people's careers, and well, that kind of thing rings true, because like after the silent movie era, some people start making sort of like epic films, as they'd call it, like movies like the Ten Commandments or Ben Hur or movies like that. Um, and then like during the 30s and 40s, and I think even 50s, like people gravitated towards like the Universal monster hit films. And then like during the 60s and 70s, um, that's when everybody craved like westerns. 80s, 90s, like everyone wants to see like the action, sci-fi, even some of horror. 2000s, that's when people started getting into like remakes, and like now we're kind of like in a superhero craze, and even that's starting to wane too, because like you see all these superhero movies coming out, and like not a lot of people are seeing them anymore, right? Or at the very least, the critics aren't liking it, but you know. And then another thing was like towards the end, when they were making that one film about that was basically a mockery of like what Manny and Nellie and Jack had to go through. I don't know if this was intentional, but it kind of made me think of how like some movies kind of like twist history around, and like some of them don't even say like inspired by true events or anything. Like they'll basically say like that's what actually happened when it didn't. Or maybe I'm looking too much into it, but the movie was still great. There's really only one thing that I'd say was against it, and that's the fact that a lot of the things that it was trying to send a message about, like the whole like racism and sexism and like taking advantage of like underage people and minors, like they still, I mean like this is kind of like a knock against Hollywood in general, but like I feel like they were trying to preach to people that like that all this stuff was bad, and like it is, but on the other hand, like Hollywood is still doing it, and like Hollywood is still enabling it, right? Like maybe not nearly as bad. Like there's a scene in the movie where like where Palmer is like playing jazz with his band, and like because of a spotlight, he looks white on camera, and and because of like this one stupid thing about like releasing the movie in the South, Manny, who is like I believe they call him the studio executive, he basically has Palmer wear blackface even though he's already black. And like that whole scene was like humiliating for him, to the point where like he walks off a set. But like and like so I mean obviously movie studios aren't doing things like that anymore, but like then there's still plenty of problems, right? I mean, going off on a limb, like there's people are still taking advantage of younger actors. I mean, there's still sexual harassment of all kinds of forms in the film industry. There's still discrimination, right? And maybe like everybody who worked on the Babylon film, I think that's wrong, but like I still think that like that's really not worth a pat on the back. But maybe that's just me. Because really the whole thing is like that one Harvey Weinstein movie that came out, I believe it's called She Said, where like where like they were basically like telling the story about how like Harvey Weinstein got exposed and everything, and well that movie got called out because well there were a bunch of people, both men and women, who knew what Weinstein was doing, and they turned a blind eye, and well they enabled him to do it in the Hollywood film industry. And well, as a result for being called out on that, like as far as I know, that movie didn't do so well. And Harvey Weinstein himself said from his own prison cell that like he wasn't surprised that it failed. Like the guy is in prison, and he was gloating that the movie made about him and his crimes failed. I mean that takes balls. Like say what you want about that guy, but that kind of took guts to say that. But I don't know, aside from all that, like the movie's still a masterpiece. Definitely see in theaters. And definitely buy it on Blu-ray like when it comes out. Like I'm gonna do it because like again, this is a contender for like one of my favorite movies of all time. But that's really it for me. Hopefully the next time, hopefully in my next review, I'll be back at home. But until then, I will see you guys later. This is probably my final movie review for the year. So you guys have a Merry Christmas and have a Happy New Year. Bye.